everybody. Welcome back to the Watch Young Booksellers podcast, where we bring you conversations from our bookstore's vast community of book professionals who talk about what they do for the love of books. Thank you for joining us. I'm Catherine, here with my co-producer Marnie. Hello, Marnie.
Hi there.
And this week we are pleased to bring you a conversation between two devoted community members. One comes from the publishing world, and the other had a long and wonderful career as a teacher and is now a first-time children's book author.
That's right. Ariel Eckstadt, who you may remember from back in season 1, is an author, agent, and book doctor who works with budding writers on getting their books published. Ariel helped lifelong educator Dan Gill become a first-time author after he pitched his idea for a book at Pitchapalooza, held during the Montclair Literary Festival.
If you don't know about Pitchapalooza, that is an annual contest that Ariel and her husband David Henry Sterry, collectively known as the Book Doctors, put on each year at the festival. Unpublished authors are invited to present a 1-minute pitch for their book. Ariel and David give feedback, and at the end, they choose one winner who then gets help in crafting their pitch, and they also get an introduction to an appropriate agent or publisher.
So after you hear this episode, you're not only going to want to attend this year's Pitchapalooza, but you're also going to want to attend the 2.5-hour workshop that Ariel and David are hosting right here in the kids' room on Sunday, April 12th. This workshop explains how to choose the right idea and how to craft a pitch and how to find the right agent or publisher. So you'll really have a leg up when you pitch your idea at the festival.
Before we hear from Ariel and Dan, Marnie, are you reading anything you want to recommend?
Yes, I'm reading Lydia Millet's. It's a short story collection called Atavists, and it's actually one of the finalists for the Story Prize, which is an annual book prize. And in fact, Catherine and I, with 2 other booksellers, Caroline and Asia, we're going to attend. And we were invited by Larry Dark. He's a friend of the store. And he's the director of the Story Prize. So we're really excited to attend that and hopefully meet some of the authors. And it's going to be a great event. So definitely recommend this book. How about you, Catherine? What are you reading?
I am reading a book called The Danger to Be Sane by Rosa Montero. This book is coming out in May in the United States. Rosa is a Spanish author. She has written over 20 novels, I believe. But this is her first book being published in the United States by Europa. It's kind of a blend of memoir and essay and then history of various writers who have had mental health sort of issues. But really the point of it, it's that there is no normal. And that's kind of a myth that we live under. And really, creativity is normal, but it's very funny, and I can't wait for it to come out in May. And I think it's really going to be a good read for anybody who is just a creative person. It's very reassuring. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah. I'm happy to share it.
Great. Okay, so let's get to our chat. Ariel Eckstadt is co-founder of the Book Doctors. She is the author of 9 books, including The Secret Language of Color, The Science, Nature, History, Culture, and Beauty of Red, Orange, Yellow, Green, Blue, and Violet. She's also an agent at large at Levine Greenberg Rostan Literary Agency, where for over 20 years she's been helping hundreds of talented writers become published authors. Lastly, Ariel co-founded the iconic company Little Mismatched and grew it from a tiny operation into a leading national brand, which now has stores from coast to coast, everywhere from Disneyland to Disney World to Fifth Avenue in New York City.
And with her is Daniel Gill. Dan was born and raised in New York City. He graduated from Iona College with a BA in psychology. He served in Vista, the National Peace Corps, where he counseled young inmates at Rikers Island Prison. He attended Columbia University and graduated with a master's degree in urban education and curriculum. Mr. Gill came to the Montclair School System in September of 1970 and retired in 2023 after completing 53 years of teaching. He was part of the committee to redesign the middle schools of Montclair in order to desegregate the schools to comply with a court order. In 2004, Mr. Gill and his students wrote a book on the history of Glenfield. It celebrated the Brown versus Board of Education ruling and its effect on desegregating the Montclair Public Schools. His illustrated children's book, No More Chairs, was selected by the National Education Association for its 2026 Read Across America program.
Enjoy the conversation, and we'll be back after to fill you in on what's coming up in the store.
I'm Arielle Eckstedt. I am an author and a book doctor for many, many years now, but I'm sitting with one of the most exciting and heartwarming stories of all the authors that I have helped over the years. So it's really fun to be here having this conversation.
Hi, Arielle.
Hi, Dan.
It's nice to be with you. I'm Dan Gill. I was a teacher in Montclair, New Jersey for 53 years on the middle school level. And now, crazy as it may seem, I am an author.
Yes, you are. Yes, you
Thanks to you, Arielle.
Yeah, so it's a funny story about how we met each other, even though we lived in the same community for a long time. And my daughter actually went to the school where you taught for decades.
Right.
But my husband and I do an event called Pitch-a-Palooza, which is kind of like American Idol for books. And we were doing a local one here in Montclair, New Jersey. And I called up what was a familiar name, but that I couldn't quite place. And up you came to the podium.
Right. So, first of all, I went as not as a participant, but as an observer. But as I thought about it, I thought, well, maybe I'll just pitch my book. And if I have given the opportunity, I thought of it as a check off on a bucket list to do and to have some fun. And I sat there and I was amazed at how many great people there were in terms of their books that they had presented to you. And I was just overwhelmed by how kind and gentle both you and your husband were to these people because, you know, as a writer, obviously you expose yourself just like any entertainer. And you were really very much looking at not just the negatives, but the positives and giving people encouragement and how they should pursue it. So as we went along, I said, well, these books are going to win, but I'll go up there anyway and I'll pitch mine. And since I've told this story many times in my classroom, it was not difficult. It was difficult to do it in a minute, but it was not difficult for me to do it. But as I was halfway through presenting the book to you, you get 1 minute. You guys give everybody 1 minute to present their book. You started looking at your phone. And as an educator, I thought to myself, well, if anybody's looking at their phone, they're no longer interested and they're moving on. So I thought, well, I lost, but that's okay. And so when I was finished, I felt, well, this was fun. This was something that I really enjoyed. And I sat down to await the winner of the presentations that day. And lo and behold, you guys selected my story.
We did. And so the funny part about this is I went on my phone because I knew this name was familiar, Dan Gill. And you started talking about being a teacher. And I was like, wait, is this the famous Mr. Gill from Glenfield? So I started Googling it to see if that's who you were. And if you can believe it, I have somehow developed the skill where I can be Googling and listening to a 1 minute pitch simultaneously. Because there have been other circumstances where I've been Googling as well. And of course, it was you. And this was such an extraordinary story. And I'm going to do the thing that I do to people when I'm helping them become professional authors. I'm going to put you on the spot right now and ask you to give some version of that 1 minute pitch so people know what the book is about.
So, what did I say? There's an elevator pitch?
Yeah.
Basically, why would a teacher keep an empty chair in their classroom for over 40 years? That's the premise of the story. And the story revolves around a birthday party that I attended. It's a true story. Myself and my best friend, Archie, and he being African-American, being invited to a birthday party in New York City, circa 1955. We're both 9 years old. We go there with great anticipation, and the mother of the boy whose birthday party was opens the door, and lo and behold, she says to me and to Archie that I could go in, but Archie couldn't because there were no more chairs. And I was shocked because I knew she had plenty of chairs, and I said, hey, you got plenty of chairs, I'll sit on the floor. And then she said, no, you don't understand. There are no more chairs. I said, no problem, I'll go home, I'll get a chair. And then she said, no, you can go in, but Archie can't because there are no more chairs. And at that point, it dawned on me, the hurt and the coded words that she was using to express her prejudice. And we gave her the presents and we went home, where there were enough chairs.
So that was I don't know exactly how close it was to the pitch you gave, because I don't even think we have it on video, but close enough.
Right.
And it was amazing to see how moved people were in the room. Mm-hmm. And, I probably said something to the effect of, when you told that story, that this is such an incredible story, such a moving story. I would like to hear more of the poetry in the telling, or something like that.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
To make us know what it's like when it would be on the page, as opposed to you being there physically telling the story. And in fact, that is what happened as you moved it onto the page.
Right.
And we did, I just want to say, for everybody out there who's trying to get a book published, and particularly those who are trying to get a children's book published, is the fact that everybody was moved by the story was the reason, number one, that we chose you. The second reason is, as an educator for 53 years, you know what is a story that is going to move kids. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people, when they come to us with a picture book, they say, oh, I tell this story to my grandchild and they love it. And they have an audience of one.
Right.
You've had an audience of hundreds, if not thousands, over the years. So we have trust in your authority, that you know what you're doing. And also is a very important story for this moment in time, and has only become even more important, frankly. And so the why you, why now, both got answered, and then the emotional pull of the story. So these were such important factors. And then as we worked together on the story, that's when the wordsmithing came to be. And do you want to talk a little bit about what that experience was like?
So, if I could just go back a little bit to why I told the story originally. So I've been teaching, as I said, for 53 years, and teaching Martin Luther King has been at one point rather easy, because the students themselves had experienced him, saw him. Some had actually been to some of his speeches and so on. But as we got into later years, the turn of the century, the 90s, the turn of the century, there was a time in which the students, I think, found him distant. And I felt that there was no emotional, you use that word about the story, there was no emotional pull to his story and to his words. And so I thought to myself, well, how am I going to draw them into Martin Luther King? As all good educators try to do, is I try to figure out what entryways can I provide for my students so that they can actually experience, not just study or take a test on, but to really experience someone. And so I said, well, I have a birthday story, and let me try it out. And I started telling the story. And immediately there was a resonance to the story, because there's this thing between a speaker and his audience. And as a teacher, when you're getting through. And as I said before, when you were looking at your phone, I thought, oh, I'm not getting through. So there's always like this, when I finish the story and I draw it out a little longer than a pitch, there's there's this pregnant silence. And what that pregnant silence tells you is that it's reached some core of their emotional being.
Mhm.
And for that, I found, oh, this is great. Not so much because I was making people uncomfortable. It was because I was making people either curious about my own story, but also about Martin Luther King, and starting to understand the emotion of what he did and how he reached people and how he tried to change the perspective that people had. So here we are. Now we have a book, and you have to make it sing. You're right. It can't just sit there as a bunch of words. And so that process begins with you helping me to get a agent, and then that agent and you securing me a contract with Little Brown, and then getting an editor.
Yeah.
And then you submit your work to the editor with, by the way, I put in all kinds of suggestions about how it should be illustrated. And then it comes back with all kinds of redactions and cross-outs. And the biggest thing that I noticed was all of my suggestions about illustrations were erased. They weren't even crossed out. They were just gone. Because now I learned something else about the children's book, is that, in fact, you write it and somebody else illustrates it.
And I just want to say something about that process for a second, because it's very surprising to people, all people, but particularly those writing children's books, picture books, that don't know about this process. So we once interviewed a children's book editor about why authors should not include directions to the illustrator. And they said, imagine giving a world famous conductor instructions on how the violinist should play, or whomever in the orchestra. That's what they do. That's how they carry out the making something beautiful, is through their instinct of how to do that. They don't need that instruction. They just need the score. So this is the score, and then the illustrator is inspired by the score to make the illustrations.
Right. So that's what I learned. I learned right away about that. And then you immediately, as an author, become an auteur. Because no one should mess with my words. And Margaret Ramo, who's my editor, starts messing with my words. And I'm getting like, why are you doing this?
A veteran editor, I should say.
Yes, a wonderful editor. May I add, who really shepherded me through this whole process. And because, you start to think, wasn't it good enough or whatever? And of course, you're trying to say what you feel are the most important elements of the story. And your editor is trying to shape the story in a way that is more adaptable to a text on a printed page rather than a spoken word. And we went through a lot of iterations with that. We had conversations about it. She cut around the edges. She didn't cut the story. She cut around the edges. And there's some things she cut, and I didn't like it. And still probably don't like it. But, be that as it may, she's the expert. And that's the other thing. Here I am, a neophyte. Who am I to tell a veteran editor, a successful one, how to do her job?
So the illustrator, Susan Gal, that's how you pronounce her last name, Gal.
Yes.
Produced what I think are some of the most beautiful illustrations that I've seen in a book in a long time. Talk about emotion.
Yes.
Somehow she was able to evoke emotion through the palette, the brush strokes, the expressions.
Yes. Tell
what that was like to see these words come to life through these illustrations.
Yeah. So you actually, as I said before, you have this actual idea of what the book should look like.
Yeah.
And so here we are now faced with who are we going to hire as the illustrator. And Margaret was really kind insofar as she probably could have selected somebody. And, what am I going to say?
Absolutely.
But she so we went back and forth. I had suggestions. She had suggestions. We looked at people's work. We were coming out of COVID. A lot of people were backed up at that point. So we were trying to get somebody who was going to be free because we wanted the book out. And she rejected some of the people I liked. They might have been too expensive. I don't know. She didn't see maybe that they were going to be fit the book. And then I rejected some people she thought, but she just kept searching and we kept on talking. And then when we saw Susan's work, I thought, okay, this is really good. This is excellent. And her, as you said, she has this incredible palette for the book that really brings out the story. And my story begins in New York City, where I grew up. And she actually sent her daughter to my neighborhood, my old neighborhood, and to take pictures, but to go to the actual door of this apartment house where this incident took place to take pictures. So when you see the door and the woman, telling us that there are no more chairs, the mom, that door, that's the door. So when I look at it, I go, wow, that really triggers in my mind, that experience. And it's really important. So people talk to me all the time. They like the story, but they always talk about the illustrations. And that is, it has to be complimentary. That has really, I think, enriched the story very much.
I grew up just a mile down Manhattan from you, Dan.
Right.
So, and the buildings where you grew up are very similar to the buildings where I grew up. And I think she's in Seattle, Susan, is that?
California.
Or California. So it was so interesting to me, even though it was from photographs, I felt like she had experienced this part of the world. Like that's how much it came to life for me.
Yeah.
So they truly are so special. So one interesting thing that I wanted to ask you about, both as a teacher and now as an author, is one thing that we tell picture book authors all the time is that the most common mistake is that people want to write a didactic story where they're teaching something. Now, what's interesting is you are teaching something here, but so many of the educators that I've given your book to say the didactic nature of the story is not, there's no evidence of it as you read it. Right. So can you just speak to that and as an educator, how you learned to do this?
Right. So, I think it goes back to the early storytelling, the caveman, around a fire, telling the story of your family, your origins, your triumphs, your challenges, your failures, your defeats, your victories. All of those things are told in such a way as not so much as a learning tool, but as a story that provides learning. Mm-hmm. And experience. So when you look at a picture book, or anybody, even anybody, you hate people who are preachy.
Yeah.
That's the last thing you want in any book, whether it be a book for an adult or a kid.
Yeah.
And kids will pick that up. I will tell you that they have these meters, these phoniness meter. That's like incredible. They know a phony a mile away, and they'll tell you that. And I think sometimes, when you become preachy, you become phony. And I think you just want to tell a story that you hope will connect to them and make them think not just about the story, but to think about their own lives and the manner in which they, in this case, how they speak and treat other people and how they use words.
So there's a famous educator who used the phrase that a children's book should offer both mirrors and windows into lives. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people think that means when they do a children's book, that it has to appeal to all children all the time, whereas actually specificity can be the means by which a window or a mirror can happen.
Yeah.
And your story is, of course, so specific, and yet it allows all children to relate.
Yeah, and I think it really hits upon something. I think that teachers provide entryways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every kid is going to find his own way. Not every kid's going to, go in the front door. Some kids are going to go in the back door. Some kids are going to go in the side door. Some kids are going to climb through the window.
Right.
And but the point is that you, as an educator, are trying to provide the variety of entryways that a kid can find out more about whatever it is that you're teaching. And when it comes to social and emotional learning, you're really trying to do that for kids without, again, telling kids, oh, you got to be good, or you got to treat, your neighbor like yourself, and so on. But to really use the good stories to make them think about how they do it and what they do. And like you said, provide this entryway into conversations. And good books create conversation.
Yeah.
And that's what people tell me about this book in their classes. They have lots of great conversations based on the story itself.
So you exited the classroom as AI was entering the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I now have this experience every day where I'm reading something that someone posted or sent to me, and I'm like, was this written by a human, or was this created by AI? And because I'm in the publishing industry, that's a really disturbing and scary thought. You, in your classroom, had kids writing their own books.
Yes.
And what we're seeing happening in publishing and film and television, all of these things, is like kids aren't even watching a whole movie anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is in tiny bits, and the storytelling may not be from a real person.
Yeah.
So now that you are retired and you're, reflecting on your career and what it's like in the classroom now, how do you feel about that, and what can we all do?
Yeah. Well, I think we're in the early innings of AI, and we're all grappling with that. I did all kinds of careers. I went to my doctor yesterday, and I said, so how has AI changed your life? I ask everybody that. I went to physical therapy today. I said, how is it going to change your life?
Yep.
And they all have their own iteration of what they think is going to happen. The doctor, for example, said, well, when I do operations now, AI is copying, or I don't know what they say, ingesting how my hand movements, so that eventually this is going to be all robotic.
Right.
And he said, it's really not that scary to me at my age. He said, but I'm scared for my kids.
Yeah.
So anything that's new is scary.
Yeah.
Anything that's different is sometimes put aside. But we really have to think about it. And I'm not sure I'm an expert in it, but I do think that it's a challenge that we can all meet. But we have to control it. Congress itself hasn't really come up with any guidelines as to what AI. The New York Times now has sued ChatGPT, or I think it's ChatGPT, because they ingested all of the New York Times into it.
Yep.
And they said, wait a minute, that's copyright infringement.
Yeah.
So there are all kinds of things of that nature. But I think that what we need to do is to look at what social media can do well, and that's to connect. I think sometimes we forget about that, and I think the connection is always being told a story. I think that creates that connection. Hopefully, you're looking at a real human being. I know that's another issue.
Yeah,
but you're hoping that we'll never lose that flavor. And certainly, you may have to go to a bookstore and see a following disclaimer: AI written by a human being.
Right.
Or with all of these older books, you put them on one side. Here are the books before AI, And here are books written after AI. And I think what people will find out is that the stories that are written by human beings touches people better.
And how do we preserve critical thinking and storytelling in the classroom when attention is being bifurcated and taken away? Like, do you feel like you could still have kids writing a book in your classroom?
Yes. Yeah, I think so, because kids like to talk. And
that's good.
And so you can, there are all kinds of ways in which you can write a story. You can record it and write it down. But I think that everybody likes a good story.
Yeah.
I've never known anybody that, when somebody says once upon a time, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm immediately in, because I'm going to find out what happened at that time. So I don't think that we're going to lose that sense, that human sense of experiencing something that's different or the same or off kilter that we may not have had we not had this opportunity. And I think that the future in books is going to be that we still need to be able to create those once upon a time stories, so that we can draw kids into these worlds. And then to talk about kids, they have short attention spans. I think, I always tell people, this generation is going to have real, they're not going to allow their children to do what they're doing right now.
Right. Yeah.
I think they're just going to be very restrictive
That's
about
interesting.
the use of their phones and so on. And I think, I tell people all the time, what happened to us as a society was COVID. COVID and the phone at the same time was like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Because now all our screen rules went out the window because kids had to be on the screen.
Right.
And the parents were on the screen because they had to work.
Yep.
And nobody's watching anybody. And everybody's frustrated. And then we realized that schools can't be run this way. And then when I tell people all the time that when the kids came back after COVID, they were like feral human beings.
Oh, God.
They were like, they were bereft of human experience. Yeah, it was really, really tough. And those, the kids who I last taught are now juniors in high school, and they lost a year of education.
Yeah.
But they most importantly lost a year of socialization and emotional growth. And I said to everybody, we should have just left everybody back 1 year. There was no rush to get through this.
Right.
It was a great loss to them. And so, I do a lot of cooperative groupings and, working. And man, did I really have to work hard at getting kids to cooperate and work collectively towards a common goal. So I think that phone itself has been a problem. I think we're going to have to figure it out. And I told the teachers when I left, I said, I always loved the challenge when I taught. I loved the kid that didn't want to learn. I loved the kids who thought that my subject was stupid or whatever. And I said, here's your challenge. How are you going to use AI in a productive way? You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Right.
So we've got to figure it out.
Well, I find it interesting hearing you talk about all of that and me thinking about the publishing industry, which is a very, very frustrating business right now, as are so many businesses, particularly creative ones, because, with phones and everything, AI, et cetera, a teacher with 53 years of experience in the classroom with an incredible story that people love and want to listen to is not what publishers are looking for.
Yeah.
Like the fact that this is out in the world is a unicorn.
Yeah.
And really, what we hear all the time is you need to be an influencer. You need to have X number of eyeballs ready for your book. And that's what determines whether or not you get published or not. At the same time, my daughter went through COVID at Glenfield.
Right.
And she learned how to knit and crochet and do all kinds of incredible crafts, which are a big part of her life now. And we're seeing a resurgence in publishing at the grassroots level. Zines are back. You know, all kinds of things that are distributed to small groups of people who have a great passion for the subject. And there's a beauty in that too. And it's, you know, for anyone out there who is looking to get a book published in what we call the traditional way with an agent and a big 5 publisher, it has become almost impossible. But the challenge, as you say, take it as a challenge, is that there are so many ways to find our readers now. And there is also a way in which publishing has been democratized via self-publishing and micro-publishers, in that now anyone can be published.
Yes.
So if you can connect to your readers, you have a way of making it as an author, and you might not have been able to do that 25, 50 years ago.
Yeah. What you speak of is something that's really how I feel about the future. We've got a divided, populace in terms of the way in which we disseminate information, but we can still meet those people where they are. And let me say another thing about what's destroying reading.
Yes, please.
The testing
yes.
of our youth in schools. It is absolutely outrageously stupid.
I'm so with you.
Teachers know where kids are.
Yeah.
There isn't a teacher in the world that's going to tell you, I don't know where Johnny is in terms of his reading ability, or Mary is in her math ability, and so on. You're constantly with that human being, and you're constantly evaluating their work, and you're constantly interacting with that person. You know where they are. And we're giving tests as if our children are some form of widgets that we can produce.
Yeah.
And I think that every kid is an individual. Every kid is different. And we're trying to take every kid and stick them into the square peg.
Yeah.
And I really hate it. And what it does is it destroys literature for kids.
Yeah.
Because now you have to be tested, I don't want to be tested on every book I read.
Well, the funny thing is, when I was a kid, the thing I did the worst at was reading comprehension on tests.
Yeah.
That's what I do for a living, and that's the thing I'm best at.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't. Well, here's another thing. We actually don't know what these tests are testing. There's no validation to these tests. There are people who stand by them and whatever. And then they're sold to America on the basis that the schools are failing. All right. If the schools are failing, then our society is failing. And education is not about what happens between 9 and 3. It's about your life experiences as well. And when you have a kid who doesn't have life experiences, of course he's going to have difficulty in school, because school reinforces for those kids everything about what they don't have. They haven't experienced.
I just took a workshop with an educator who talks about, he's Native American, and talks about the colonialization of American education. And he talks about a school that was mostly indigenous kids, and the scores were so horrible, the worst that you could have. Kids were getting, kicked out of school, bad behavior, the whole thing. And a new principal came in who was himself indigenous, and he said, we're going to change what we're doing in the school. Instead of testing, our goal is going to be making the kids happy.
Yeah.
And everything turned around.
Yeah,
but my question for you with all of this is, we're so far down the testing rabbit hole. How do we get out of it?
Well, parents are going to have to, I always say that schools change when parents, pipe up.
Yeah.
I think they should be outraged that the new thing is, you don't have to, like in high school, you don't have to read the whole book.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, oh, you don't have to see the whole film.
Yeah.
Why would you just watch this snippet?
Yeah.
And you'll really understand it. They're going to have to really start to complain about that and to ask, one, are the tests actually testing what they say they are? And number two, aren't there better ways for us to evaluate how well kids have learned and what they've learned and how well they do things? And three, schools should not be just they shouldn't be like cognitive factories. They should certainly stress the arts as much as they stress the academics, because for many kids, that's where they can find something that they can relate to and be successful at, which leads to success in other areas.
One of my pet peeves of my daughter's education was that the core curriculum made it so that you almost never read an entire novel, and you mostly read nonfiction.
Yeah, but that's what everybody's tested on.
Yeah. So it was, if she hadn't come from a family of readers, she would have gone through almost all of school without having read a novel.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, when you have, these huge companies selling curriculums and you keep changing the curriculums, it's so cumbersome. And I feel like, just putting a novel in front of a kid, forget about curriculum. That's such a wonderful experience. And I feel scared that we're losing that.
Yeah, I agree. I really do. And it worries me because I love the written word and I love a story. I love a good story. I use, by the way, I use picture books in my class all the time, long before I ever thought about what my story was to be.
Yeah.
Because I thought it would reach kids. It's quicker, faster, and like you said, not preachy, but real conversation starters for them.
Yeah.
And I think that parents, my point is, parents, if you're listening out there, don't stop reading to your kids.
Yes.
Even if it's a newspaper article, even if it's something that you find interesting in the news, even if it's just a poem that you found important, even if it's a letter that you received from your father, anything to reawaken for them the beauty of the written word and how it conveys to them something of importance.
That seems like the perfect place to stop, doesn't it? So, Dan, in wrapping up, I would love to hear what books you have to recommend.
Well, my favorite book, and this is really hard, by the way.
Okay.
So if you're out there, please don't think that I don't appreciate so many things. But my favorite book of all time is Catch-22.
Wow. Do you know I have never read it? So now I have to go home and read it.
And I can tell you it's because as an adolescent, when I read it, it spoke to me perfectly, because what it emphasizes is the absurdity of the things we think are important. And it tells us the things we think are important are actually not. And it skewers that beautifully, and it skewers the concept of war and how we conduct ourselves as a society towards hurting other human beings. So that was my favorite book of all time.
Great. Okay. So the book that I was going to talk about seemingly has nothing to do with our conversation, but I think it does. And it's I'm rereading it because it's one of my favorite books of all times. And it's The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs.
Oh, yes.
And she was a journalist and an activist in New York City who wrote this book in the late 60s. And it's really about the community rising up against larger forces, moneyed forces that are forcing things on the community that the community does not want. And I think we're in that moment right now where it is up to us joining forces as community members to say what we need and what we want, and to fight these much, much larger forces that seem like they can't be fought. And actually, it's kind of goes into the catch-22. These books, one from nonfiction, one from fiction, teach us the tools that we need.
That sounds like a great book for a Montclair community read.
It should.
It really,
yes.
I think it would be fabulous if we did that.
Watchung Booksellers.
Yes.
Next, I think we should have a double bill, Catch-22
Yes.
and The Death and Life of Great American Cities.
Yes. Yeah, that would be great.
Well, this was so fun.
Yes.
I always love talking to you.
Absolutely.
And the great thing, I'm just going to do a full-on pitch for buying No More Chairs, to say that, this is a book ostensibly for 5 to 10-year-olds, but I feel that it is a gift book for all ages, which if I was trying to sell the book, someone would say, you can't have a book for all ages, but you actually can. And this is it. And it's so beautiful. And it just gives hope. And I hope that everyone out there listening will go buy a copy or more.
And thank you to Watchung Booksellers, my favorite place in the town, the community, because it's so welcoming. And the new children's bookstore here is just filled with great things for kids to read and explore. And if you haven't made your way here, get here immediately.
I agree.
Thank you, Dan, for talking about your journey to becoming a published author, and Ariel for shepherding Dan's story into the world. Listeners, you can find Dan's book in the kids' room, and all the books they've discussed are in our show notes and at watchungbooksellers.com.
It's spring break in Montclair, so there are no events this week. But next Tuesday, the Montclair Public Library hosts New Yorker writer and Dean Emeritus of Columbia Journalism School, Nicholas Lehman, to discuss Returning, a search for home across 3 centuries, with journalist Dale Russakoff.
And on Wednesday, we welcome debut author Susie Nadler to talk about her YA novel, Lies We Tell About the Stars, with author Jason Tanz.
And as we mentioned earlier, on Sunday, April 12th, Ariel Eckstadt and David Henry Sterry will host a writer's workshop on how to get published. Also that day, we host our first morning workshop. Author Laura Marks Fitzgerald will host a 6-week workshop for working through burnout.
You can get details and tickets for all of our events, story times, and book clubs through our newsletter, show notes, or at watchungbooksellers.com.
The Watchung Booksellers podcast is produced by Catherine Counsell and Marnie Jessup, and it's recorded at Watchung Booksellers in Montclair, New Jersey. The show is edited by Catherine Counsell, and original music is composed and performed by Violet Muika. Research and show notes by Caroline Chertleff. Thank you to the staff at Watchung Booksellers and the Kids Room for all their hard work and love of books.
And thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please like, follow, and share it. You can follow us on social media at Watchung Booksellers. And if you have any questions or ideas, you can reach us at wbpodcast@watchungbooksellers.com.
We'll see you next time. Until then, for the love of books, keep reading.